So, an annual constant for Mac admins is Apple's macOS release cycle. Since macOS 10 Lion in 2011, a new version has shipped every year. So we don't know what Apple's going to call it yet, aside from it being macOS 27, but we can make some predictions about how to prepare for it based on past year's releases. Historically, Apple has run 3 macOS beta programs. There's Developer, there's Appleseed for IT, and Public, and I'll dig into each in a moment. So the Mac admin year follows a steady rhythm. Summer is prep time for the new OS. Fall and winter bring OS release and deployment. Spring is getting ready for that cycle to begin again. So to start the cycle, usually sometime in June, this year, the week of June 8th, Apple will hold its annual Worldwide Developers Conference, or WWDC. So at WWDC, Apple will release the first beta of its new OS version, with the final version expected in the fall. And, sometimes that date moves around. So through the summer, Apple rolls out macOS betas every 2 weeks with a faster pace as the launch gets closer. So to illustrate this, let's look at the Developer and Appleseed Tahoe beta cycle from 2025. So as you can see, the 2-week cadence is maintained for June and July, but then it speeds up considerably in August. So Tahoe also had a public beta open to all, but it had fewer releases. So I'm really going to be excluding it from this discussion as less relevant for enterprise prep because it had fewer chances to catch issues. And more opportunities matter as the summer beta cycle has shortened over the years, cutting prep time from nearly 5 months to now it's just over 3. So you also will get some limited prep time after the release. Apple allows up to a 90-day deferral, and then the upgrade is going to appear for your users regardless. So where to begin? My advice is to plan for both outcomes, supporting the new OS at launch, but also be ready to defer in case of show-stopping issues. So the first step in both approaches is running all the betas, from that first beta that gets released at WWDC through the final pre-release build. So the reason why you should be running all the betas is that they'll help you catch problems early and allow you to file feedback with Apple about them. So why do you want to do this? Well, the sooner you report issues, the more likely Apple is to fix them before release day. So to help with this, macOS includes the Feedback Assistant app. So you would sign into the app with your Apple account, and you could start filing your feedback with Apple. Using an Apple account enrolled with the Appleseed IT program for feedback instead of a developer beta account is something I would recommend. And the reason is that feedback reports sent through Appleseed are fewer in number, and they're also much more likely to reach the enterprise development teams. Now, for folks with AppleCare tickets that allow unlimited tickets, you can submit cases that reference your feedback items, and then you can track the cases and your feedback through your AppleCare support team. Now, when you're submitting feedback, describe the issue, how to reproduce it, the expected results, and what actually happened. And you should also provide a sysdiagnose captured as near as possible to when the issue occurred. So to create a sysdiagnose, I'm sure this is something a lot of you are familiar with, but you would run the sysdiagnose command in terminal as root. It'll create a compressed log bundle for your Mac state for Apple's analysis later. Now, you can also create a sysdiagnose file using the Systems Diagnostics command in the Activity Monitor app. Now, for more information on this, please see the link at the bottom of the screen. Now, Feedback Assistant will also automatically create a sysdiagnose at submission time, but this may miss key data if you're not sending your feedback in near the time when the issue occurred, or if you saw it on another Mac. So for those who want to dig into this topic more, there's a good tidbits post which goes into it in detail, and for that, please see the link at the bottom of the screen. Now, I know that it often feels like filing feedback is yelling into the void, but really, it is important, and here's why. From Apple's perspective, if something is an actual problem, someone is going to file feedback about it. No feedback, no problem. Now, for those unsatisfied with this, think of feedback as being like a ticket system at your work. If someone is complaining about a problem, what do you tell them? File a ticket. Why? Well, that way you can track it. You can see how many other people are filing similar tickets. And most importantly, you can figure out how much effort you really need to devote into actually fixing this problem. So next, let's talk about how you get devices enrolled into Apple's beta programs. So there's a couple of ways. The first is that you can sign into a device using an Apple account, and the second is that you can issue a token from an MDM server. So let's look first at the Apple account method. If you have an Apple account that has an Apple Developer Connection membership, you can then sign into that Mac with that Apple account and get access to the beta updates from the developer beta or the public beta program. Once you choose the beta program that you want to get the updates from, Software Update will show beta updates from that program. Likewise, you can sign in using a managed Apple account from an organization that is enrolled in the Appleseed for IT program and get access to the Appleseed beta feed as well as the public beta. Now, the second method uses MDM distributed tokens and requires enrolling your organization in Appleseed for IT via Apple Business or Apple School Manager. Now, Appleseed enrollment in Apple Business or ASM can be done by specific roles. So in Apple Business, you can use the organization administrator, IT administrator, or people manager. In ASM, you can use administrator, people manager, or site manager. Now, Apple's docs will often just reference administrators, but ASM limits you to 5 administrator accounts, which may be an issue if you're part of a large organization like an extended school district. Now, this limit doesn't appear to apply to Apple Business, as it's not mentioned in Apple's documentation. But Apple Business just came out last week, so perhaps they just didn't add it yet. We'll see. Now, with Apple replacing Apple Business Manager last week, Apple Business has diverged from Apple School Manager in terms of the interface. So I'm going to be showing screenshots from the former Apple Business Manager, which should resemble what's currently in Apple School Manager, and then cover what the current Apple Business interface looks like. So in ASM, the required privilege is Administer Appleseed for IT, and this privilege is enabled by default for administrators. People managers also have this privilege, but it's disabled by default. It would need to be enabled before you would enroll your organization. Now, site managers are another role, and one that is exclusive to Apple School Manager. It has this privilege enabled by default. Now, once you have the account necessary privileges sorted out, you can enroll your organization with the Appleseed for IT program. Now, one way to do this enrollment is through Apple School Manager. Now, if you haven't previously signed up, you would log into your instance and select Preferences from the menu on the lower left corner of the browser window. Now, in the Preferences, there's a Beta Features option with an enrollment option for Appleseed. Now, one thing to know is that this Beta Features section is actually for managing beta features for Apple School Manager, but it does provide an easy path for signing up for Appleseed, which is ultimately what you want in this case. You would start by clicking the Begin Enrollment button. You'll be first asked to accept Apple's General Beta Program Agreement. This doesn't enroll you in Appleseed yet, so you would need to review it and then click Agree if you accept the terms. You'll then be provided the opportunity to join the Appleseed program, and if you want to go forward, you would click Join. And then you'll see the second beta agreement, which is going to be the one for the Appleseed beta program. Review this and click Agree if you accept. And that should be it. After that, you should be at the Appleseed for IT site and signed in as the managed Apple account you just used to join the program. Now, in ASM, you may see something like this when you look in beta features afterward. Sometimes things are showing up in here, sometimes they don't. This is normal because this is the section for actually enabling beta features for ASM itself. So if Apple hasn't actually got a beta program running for ASM at the moment, you just see this and there's nothing. Now, as promised earlier, here's how things look in Apple Business. After you log in, you can access the roles and permissions along with beta features by clicking on your account and selecting Settings. And the roles and permission settings are accessible from here. Now, circling back to our earlier discussion, there are 3 roles in Apple Business that can enroll in Appleseed on behalf of an organization. There's Organization Administrator, there's IT Administrator, and there's People Manager. So the permission name has also changed. It no longer references Appleseed. It is now edit access to Apple services for managed Apple accounts and allowed apps for sign-in with Apple. So here it is selected for the organization administrator. Here's how it looks for the IT role. As you can see, it's also selected by default here. And lastly, here's it selected as part of the people manager role. Apple did make a change here to automatically select this for the people manager role, where previously an Apple Business Manager was not selected by default. So the beta features settings are also accessible from here, including the ability to sign up for Appleseed for IT. Regrettably, I'm not going to be able to show that part again because I did it through Apple Business Manager and then Apple Business came along, so I wasn't able to show it in Apple Business, unfortunately. But after enrolling in Appleseed for IT, you can confirm that access is enabled in Apple Services under Access Management in the Apple Business Console. So now that your organization is enrolled in Appleseed, let's look at obtaining beta tokens. Now, HCS Technology Group has a solid guide for deploying them via DDM with Jamf Pro blueprints. The token steps should also apply to any MDM that uses DDM to deploy software update settings. Now, the method that the folks at HCS have documented includes using a script written by Neil Johnson from Microsoft, who uses an ADE token from Apple Business to do the beta token retriever. I believe Neil, I know he's speaking at the conference. I don't know if he's here, but if he is here, thank you so much, Neil, for writing this script. Now, for those who want to know more, what the HCS folks and Neil's script are doing is covered as part of Apple's documentation on how to enroll a device using beta tokens. Now, I'm going to diverge from the documentation by showing Apple Business in place of Apple Business Manager, but the process should overall be the same. So the start point of the process is logging into your Apple Business instance, either as a device enrollment manager, an organization administrator, or an IT administrator, and then clicking on devices. In the devices section, you would go to management and select connect external device management. Remember, Apple Business has its own MDM server. That's the thing up on the top that says turn on built-in device management. The one at the bottom is the one you want for connecting an external device management. You won't be assigning any devices to this service. All you'll be using this for is getting an ADE token. So you'll need to create and upload a public key for it, so we'll need to create one. Now, the beta token script that Neil wrote handles creating one as part of its run. So once the public key is created, the script is set to watch the downloads folder in your home folder for downloaded ADE tokens. So the script will create the public key, and once it's done creating it, it'll drop the public key in a folder for you to pick it up. Once uploaded, you should now be able to download your ADE token. Now, in the event that you need to get this token later, you can also get it by clicking here in the Device Management Service window in Apple Business. And that'll give you a menu, and one of the options is going to be Download Token. Now, downloading the ADE token will allow the script to finish its run, where it'll take the credentials it needs from the ADE token to access the API endpoint shown on the screen and download beta tokens for all of Appleseed's beta programs. And once it has the beta tokens, the script will display them as a list. So these tokens are going to be specific to an organization enrolled with Appleseed, so individual companies, schools, and institutions are going to have different codes appearing for them. Now, here's what the Tahoe beta program code is for my organization, or it would be, but I've replaced all the relevant values on the slide with non-working ones. Now, once you have that beta token, you can then plug it into a software update settings DDM configuration and deploy it to your managed Macs. So in this case, I'm using Jamf Pro's blueprints and choosing to require my devices to enroll in the Tahoe beta program without the ability to opt out. And here's how those settings would appear on the managed devices I'm deploying it to. Meanwhile, in the software update setting and system settings, you can see that this Mac is enrolled in the Appleseed beta program, and there's no option to get out of it because the setting is managed. Now, for folks thinking, Rich, you have just left out a ton of vital, necessary, gotta-have-it details, and you are absolutely correct. I've got those details captured in several blog posts, and I'll be including links to those posts at the end of the talk. I got you covered, fam. So now that we've sorted out how to enroll devices, what devices should be enrolled? So there's really two main choices here. There's a virtual machine or there's hardware that's compatible with the new OS. Of the two, my usual go-to is going to be a virtual machine because I can spin them up quickly with the new OS, and most virtualization software offers the option of cloning VMs. So that means I can build a test VM using a new beta release and then clone copies of it as needed for my testing. This provides me with a way to minimize time between the release of a new beta and my testing of it. Now, that said, a virtual machine is not going to perfectly replicate hardware, and you may see problems in virtual machines that are impossible to replicate on an actual Mac. My advice here is to leverage the time saved with virtual machines when it comes to your testing, but you should also be verifying what you're seeing on an actual Mac, especially if things are going wrong in the VM. So when testing on actual hardware, I would recommend using a relatively new machine that has minimal RAM, storage, and processing power. And the reason why I recommend this is that if your workflows run fine there, they should perform fine on more powerful systems. So for those who have been wanting to try out the MacBook Neo, this may be a good candidate for this kind of beta testing. All right, next, let's look at the annual cycle I talked about and where we're at in it. So summer is prep time for the new OS. Fall and winter bring the OS release and deployment. Spring is getting ready for this cycle to begin again. We're in spring, and this is great because this is the best time to start your preparations and reassessing what you've been doing. So for your spring preparations, there's really 4 questions to ask yourself. What went right during the previous OS cycle? What did not go right? What's coming out that I need to incorporate into this year? And this is also a really good time to look at the hardware in your fleet because we know for certain that Intel Macs cannot run macOS 27 because Apple told us that last year. So if you're planning to require 27, you need to get the Intel Macs out of your fleet. And a good place to start is looking at your tooling, particularly those tools that you didn't choose. Do you have a tool that security says you absolutely positively have to use, but it never really seems to be ready in time for that new OS release? Now is a good time to identify alternatives and propose them, and even identify if you still need that tool at all. Maybe that tool is no longer needed because Apple introduced a new security feature that makes it obsolete. The spring timeframe is good for making these assessments because your organization's annual budget may still be in the process of being finalized. Now, as part of your tool evaluation, don't forget the stone tablet in the room. macOS 27 is the last macOS that's going to have full Rosetta support. So if you have apps that needs Rosetta to run, press your vendors now for universal or Apple Silicon versions of those apps so that you will have a full year before the macOS 28 beta cycle starts up. Now, for more information about Apple's Rosetta transition plans, they do have a K-Base article available via the link shown on the screen. Now, new OS cycles are also a good opportunity to revisit existing workflows, as I have found that users are more open to change alongside a new OS release. So use the betas to test new approaches on non-production devices while you keep your production stable, like overhauling device onboarding or shifting from using MDM profiles to DDM declarations for your settings. This allows you to evaluate changes safely without impacting your current deployments. Now, one particular area to re-examine is how you're handling software update management. As of macOS 26 Tahoe, the MDM profile-based management options are now deprecated. The DDM software update settings declaration replaces this, and it includes deferral settings. And that makes it a good fit to use now, since you should already be planning for deferring the OS. Now, because the beta cycle may absorb much of your time, use the spring to finish key projects before WWDC happens, and if possible, defer others until after the fall release. Also, identifying competing initiatives early and align with your manager how they may reduce the amount of time that you have for testing the betas, and thus affect how ready you're going to be for that fall OS release. So, once WWDC happens, we're into the beta testing cycle for new operating systems. How long do you have? I would say plan for a 90-day cycle, which puts you roughly into early September. So the last 2 beta cycles ran for about 98 days, which should hopefully provide some margin for you. Now, Apple usually ships betas every 2 weeks early on, with that cadence accelerating near the end. Now, I would recommend using at least 2 devices per beta. One that's upgraded with each beta through all the releases to help you test that upgrade stability, and one that gets wiped for each beta to validate fresh installs and setup workflows. And if possible, add a third that's set up on the current shipping OS and then upgraded to the latest beta, and that way you can test both paths. What's it look like fresh? What's it look like when you're upgrading? Now for each beta, file feedback on any issues you encounter. And for third-party software, also open vendor tickets so that they're aware. Some vendors may say they don't support beta OS versions until final release, but it is still important to report those issues, and if needed, especially if you're not getting good feedback from the vendor, escalate internally with your management to evaluate whether or not that vendor is still meeting your requirements, because honestly, it might be time to switch vendors. Remember, when you file feedback, this is the general outline of what you should provide. If Apple can't reproduce the problem on their end, they may not be able to fix it. And another part of your testing is that by joining the beta program, you agreed, or someone else did on your behalf, to Apple's beta agreement. And that includes both a non-disclosure agreement and restrictions on discussing the software with non-participants. So how do you know where that line is? If Apple has publicly discussed something in a WWDC session, a press release, or some other public-facing communication that literally anybody in the world can see, then it is fair game to discuss publicly. If it is not, it is covered by that non-disclosure agreement. And this applies to all macOS betas, including those with public in the name. Does this mean that you can't discuss your problems you're seeing with anybody? Well, you absolutely can with other folks who have agreed to the same beta program agreement that you have. So one place that Apple has made available for beta discussions is Apple's developer forums. Now, another place you'll be able to find folks participating in the beta programs is the Mac Admin Slack, though of course you will need to verify that the folks you're talking to are also in the beta program before you discuss anything that's covered by Apple's NDA. So just use some common sense, figure out who you can talk to, and then feel free to chat around. Beta testing is also a good time to validate your deferral settings. A Mac enrolled in the beta program should stop receiving new betas once a deferral is applied. Now that said, deferral behavior can be inconsistent. So if betas are still appearing in software update despite having a deferral, file feedback with Apple. Now, for macOS 27, I would recommend using a software update settings DDM configuration to manage your deferral settings. So in this case, I'm using Jamf Pro's blueprints, and I'm choosing to block major OS upgrades for 90 days. And here's how those settings appear on the devices that I'm deploying it to. So what you should see is that thing down at the bottom that says major period 90. That's your deferral. Now, as previously, I am leaving out a ton of details on deploying deferral settings in the interest of time. Instead, I also have these details in a blog post, and I'll be including a link at the end of the talk. Now, by late August, you should be able to assess if you're going to need to defer or if you're going to be able to support the new OS on release day. Once you have a good understanding of what you'll be doing, start sending out communication to your users on what they should expect. So if you're supporting on release day, have communication ready on what's supported. Tell folks how they can upgrade. If folks need to upgrade by a set date, let them know what's expected and by when. If you're deferring support, same idea. Have communication ready on what's supported. Tell folks why the new OS isn't supported. Tell folks when you'll expect to be able to support the new OS. Tell folks what the process is going to be if a Mac upgrades to the new OS anyway. There are going to be leakers. Please be prepared for them. If you're planning to support on release day, you may want to prepare deferral communication anyway. That way it's ready to send out in the event that there's a late-breaking problem and you need to switch from we're supporting you on release day to hey, we need to hang on for a moment. So on release day, send out a fresh communication to users outlining what to expect. Essentially, it's going to be the same as your 2-week messaging, just updated for any last-minute changes. If you're ready to go on release day, tell folks how they can upgrade and anything else they need to be aware of. If folks need to upgrade by a set date, remind them of what's expected and by when. If you're deferring, communicate why the new OS isn't ready yet and when you expect to be able to support it. If you plan to enforce upgrading to the new OS by a certain date, you can use DDM management to do so. So here's an example of how you could use Jamf Pro's blueprints to enforce updating to macOS 27 by the end of 2026. So here's how the enforcement would appear to your users using the example of upgrading from Sequoia to Tahoe. And in the interests of time, I have greatly sped up the upgrade process. So the first thing it's going to tell you is that there's an upgrade waiting. Then it's going to ask you to restart. Your users may get prompted for authentication, depending on whether or not your MDM has the Bootstrap token escrowed. And then once the authentication is provided, reboots, upgrades itself, and there you go. You're on your shiny new OS. So as with similar topics, I am leaving out a lot of details on upgrade enforcement. Instead, I do have these details again in a blog post, and I'll be providing a link at the end of the talk. So no matter which way you wind up going, hopefully what I've shared will enable you all to develop a smooth process for testing and deploying both macOS Next and future versions of macOS. And as promised earlier, repeatedly, here are the links to my blog posts along with other useful links. Got some more useful links. And hopefully the most useful links you see in this entire presentation, because this is how you get it all. PDF is available from the top link, and keynote slides, which include the slides, the speaker's notes, the demos, the absolutely everything, is available via the link on the bottom. And I will leave that up on the screen and see if we've got some time for questions.
Thanks, Rich. We've had one question in the app, which has been answered by Amanda. Thank you very much. Saved me a job. So look, have we got any questions from the floor? Start this side. Oh.
Yeah, got that gentleman over there.
Always the other end of the auditorium.
At least I think it's a gentleman. The lights up here are very bright. I'm sorry.
Rich, you mentioned discussing betas and the Mac admin Slack. I think there is a dedicated channel. I can't remember what it's called, but they actually validate that you're in the beta program before allowing you access to the channel. So that's probably the best place to do it if you're going to do it.
You are correct. I did not want to call out that channel specifically.
Sorry.
It's a recorded talk, but yes, you are correct.
Any more? No, great. Thanks very much, Rich.
All right. Thank you.